Leadership, is it usually just assigned to older people with lots of graying hairs like myself who think they have all the wisdom? Or can leadership also be influenced by young people? Where does leadership fit? What do these youngsters think of leadership? And also talking on the subject is sustainability. What is the world looking at in terms of sustainability, and how does leadership impact that? So I have with me today a guest who's talking about both these things, a young person talking about leadership and a young person talking about a sustainable planet. I'm so excited to have this guest on this podcast today. So let's talk. Hello. This is Tagore, and welcome to my podcast, A Pint of Imbecile Wisdom, where I talk to everyday people with everyday stories and hopefully great inspirations for the rest of us. Today is yet another session where I'm talking about leadership. As I said to you guys before, leadership has evolved. There's people who are coming in with different flavors of personalities, different school of thoughts and so forth, and creating this concept of what leadership means to them. So here's another flavor today. I'm talking to my buddy Lewis, who is he's a Singaporean guy, professionally in the sustainability agenda, looking at technologies and how the world can be a better place. But we're going to talk to him a little bit about that today, but we're going to talk to him basically about leadership. So welcome, young man, to my podcast. Hi, Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you for introduction, Dominic. Nice to be here and looking forward to share some of my thoughts about leadership.
Okay, Lewis, so start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Louis. I'm currently based in Singapore, as was mentioned. So I'm working in an investment holding company whereby we basically look into investing in mining companies and therefore mining assets. So when it comes to mining, it can be across different materials that we look at. It can be coal, it can be forward-facing metals, etc. And one of the things that I do is to scout around for technologies, climate tech, which basically can help to reduce the carbon emissions from our mines. Other than that, I also look at other areas, for example, carbon credits, looking at sustainable finance. Those are things of my interest as well. This is my main job. Besides my main job, I also am a trustee for one of the UK charities where I basically look at the climate change agenda as well, in particular to set up sustainability related policies and goals to ensure that the charity is actually carbon neutral, which is along the targets as well. So other than that, I also help to mentor a few startups because I think that sustainability is an area whereby we all have something to share. I think it's important to guide and support and collaborate with one another, and so that we can all accelerate the growth in this space and therefore hit different countries, NDCs, or the different countries and companies' net zero goals. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Oh, glorious. Okay. As I said to you just before we got on the call, we've been exchanging messages for a while, and I never perceived you to be such a young individual. You know, I thought of you as a graying bald man. I'm sorry. talking about his wisdom on leadership to me, and what a pleasant surprise it was to see somebody so young as yourself, so passionate about this topic of leadership. Okay, what I'd like to do today is talk about leadership a bit, and then also talk again about the sustainability agenda, just a little bit, since you're into it. So start off with, Lewis, as a young man, what does leadership mean to you personally?
Personally, I think let's understand where the term leadership comes from. So I think that from my understanding, leadership actually, by definition, is the act of leading a group of people or organization. That was where the term actually comes along. But across my experiences and my journey, whether is it in school or outside of school, basically I think the leadership at its core is really about inspiration, inspiring others. It's basically about motivating different groups of individuals to surpass their own expectations through the power of example. It's very important as a leader, when we communicate our thoughts, to actually be basically being able to demonstrate it first and therefore lead by examples. In addition, I think that genuine leadership actually extends even further than that. It's about, in a company, it is about creating a workplace culture whereby individuals can actually take calculated risk and also learn from failures. Because such actions are often frowned upon in some companies whereby there's a very risk-averse culture, But I think that as a leader, we must be the shield when someone actually wants to explore new opportunities or new approaches when doing their work. And I think lastly, to me, leadership is also about empathy and support during challenging times, whether is it COVID or whether the employees in the company actually have any family or personal issues. I think a leader does not stand by and just let the employees do what he or she just fade off, but basically the leader must actually extend a helping hand and ask he or she how does he or she need any help, and what can the leader actually do to support along the case as well. So I think leadership to me is more of a supporting. It's not really about the authoritarian sort of top-down approach, which maybe some in traditional sense was perceived to be the case. But now I think leadership should not be that way.
Louis, I think, but I think you mentioned the key word here, the authority side of it. I don't think that's being leaders, that's being managers. And I think there's a huge difference between managers and leaders. In my humble opinion, I think managers can be made, they can be built, but I think leaders are born. I mean, it's an inbuilt capability of yours, either with what you're born with or you decide to inherit along your life. And I think the key thing about leadership is empathy. Yeah, I think it starts with empathy. Whether you're leading a team to a goal or whatever it may be, it starts with empathy. And that's, I think, is the key difference between leaders and managers. Managers are identified by organizations, I think, but leaders are built, by sort of things. So how do you think leadership has changed, or our perception of leadership has changed over the past few years or decade or whatever?
I think that nowadays leadership has moved away, as I've mentioned earlier, from the authoritarian sort of control to a more transformation and shared leadership idea. So I think, as you also shared earlier, that I think leaders are totally different from managers. They are expected to be more than managers because leaders are actually catalysts for change and also a source of inspiration. So I think that one of how leadership has changed, one of the main drivers that actually has changed how leadership is in this century, basically is the rapid pace of our interconnected world. Because nowadays, as we all know, there is internet, there is ChatGPT, there is Google and all sorts of things, where it basically facilitates information flowing at unprecedented levels much faster than before. So therefore, leaders must be able to embrace diversity and also leverage on it. And what can they do? I think they can do things such as having proactive strategies and innovative approaches, keeping up to date with what exactly is happening to ensure that their team and the organization is ahead of the curve. And also, leaders must look ahead. They cannot be, I think that as a leader, they should be more proactive than being reactive. With that being said, it means that leaders must be able to anticipate unforeseen challenges, identify new opportunities daily, and also look around for what are some emerging markets and products, so that it ensures that the team and the organization is well positioned to deal with the fast-paced nature of the world. And also, because now we have Zoom. Previously, maybe before COVID, I think the world was much bigger in the sense that people must travel to interact with people from different regions or different countries. But nowadays with Zoom, it allows a leader to actually have a much bigger and a more diverse workforce. Because I think diversity, especially in a sustainability sense, is something that is very well embraced. So some companies do take that into consideration when hiring people. And the implications for a leader is that now they are actually forced, in a good or bad way, to actually lead a team of individuals from different backgrounds. And also, besides the fact that they may be from different countries, they are also of different generations, different age. Maybe they are millennials, Gen Z, or the different Gen X, I think. So basically, each of these generations actually bring something new or bring different perspectives because of how they have grown up in their generations or in their countries. So I think leaders must be able to see and be aware of conflicting perspective that is because of the different generations or different backgrounds, and therefore, after the leader understand it, therefore cater to the differing needs and not just sweep it across aside and treat it that it's natural along that way. So I think overall, I think that leadership has really shifted from a more traditional authoritative style to a more dynamic, adaptive approach. That I think I don't think there's any perfect leader yet. I think leaders must all learn along the way and grow. Myself, I'm also learning and growing at the same time as well. So I think being reflective will then aid this as well. Yeah, thank you.
Louis, do you think that leadership is just constrained to into a corporate world, or leadership goes beyond that to humanity and society as we are today?
I think leadership is beyond just a corporate world. Even in our day-to-day life, I think in our families, if we are parents and all, I think leadership, how we act as home is very important to how our children actually sees us. So this is a form of self-leadership, by basically we must present ourselves as being understanding, communicative, as those are things I mentioned earlier. So it's not just limited to a corporate setting, it's everywhere. How we interact with others, even when we go out, when we go and buy things, or when we interact with different other groups of stakeholders in the market out of our workplace, the way we present ourselves, the way we actually communicate and assist others, those are actually acts of leadership as well. So it should not be just we are a leader in our workplace and not outside of workplace. Yeah.
So you know what, Louis, in a nutshell, what you're saying, it's about humanity. Leadership is about humanity. It's about how we are as human beings, whether it is the empathy, the respect, the vision to help others grow, and whatever it may be. I think leadership really is about the core element of humanity, looking at people beyond their race, their color, their genders, their whatever else, these barriers that mankind have made. I think it's about looking beyond all of those and basically following the act of humanity, if I may call that, So which brings me to my next question now. We've got like early 20-year-olds coming into the workplace. They're a different generation, they're a different mindset. They've got things that at least my generation never had when I was growing up, predominantly like things like the internet.
Yes.
Yeah. The voice of minorities speaking up, be it the voice of different religions, be it the voice of different regions, like the voice of Asia is so powerful at the moment on the global platform. So as a leader, what do we need to keep in mind? And then you have the woke culture, for example. You have lots of people raising up their voices, right or wrong. How is that impacting leadership, and what do leaders need to keep in mind in such a scenario, in your opinion?
Sure, thank you. Keep in mind. Yes, I think that nowadays there's all this internet, there's all this woke and cancel culture. I think this makes things more complicated, but I think as long as we are able to make use of it, that will be fine. So I think cancel culture to me is like a form of social ostracism. Basically, individuals, anyone can actually face public, not for lack of better word, humiliation if they basically say something wrong or do something wrongly. So that does pose some challenge. So because in the sense that if the leader actually make a small misstep or revelation, or suddenly someone found out a past mistake, then it could lead to swift and even disproportionate consequences, because social media is so prevalent and all sorts of things that it could spread like wildfire out there. So that may cause some leaders to actually not want to have open dialogues with their team members, or it may actually stifle some form of innovation, because that is sort of letting them go out of their comfort zone. So to tackle that, what I like to do is a concept of self-leadership. Basically as a leader, I think that one thing that we all can do is basically to have some form of self-reflection and introspection to ensure that whatever actions that we actually do aligns with our personal values and also of the organization that we actually work in. And by having this constant reflection sort of feeling, I think it does build some confidence and resilience and adaptability, because we understand what is the basis of our actions that we actually do, so that it's easy to go back to it to see what can we do better, or what have we done well. So I think also by the fact that we are actually constantly reflecting, it does portray a better look to our employees, because I believe it will actually increase our trust and respect of ourselves. Because we all know that everyone basically makes a lot of mistakes, but the fact that we are open to our employees to say that, okay, I regularly on a weekly basis actually do some form of self-reflection to look back at how could I have managed this team better, or what could I have done otherwise, it does show the employee that the leader has a sense of personal growth and accountability. And I think that I know I did mention earlier that as a leader in this context of cancel culture or woke culture, they may be afraid of taking actions that seem to be out of the norm. But I think that that should not be we should not take actions out of the norm. We should continuously do things. We should continuously innovate, because it's about actually how do we, when we think of doing something out of the new, even if it fails, I think it does teach us certain actions. It does teach us certain concepts that we can bring forward to help the team and help the leadership actually grow in the organization. So I think that, in essence, I think that the work culture or the rapid pace of internet does pose some challenges, but it should just make a leader be aware of more of all these different things, but it should not stop the leaders from doing what a good leader should do, which is thinking out of the box, being communicative, being open, and most importantly, I think it should facilitate them to reflect more on a day-to-day, on a week-to-week basis on how can they be better and be authentic. I think authenticity is very important, and I don't think any work culture can be against authenticity. Yeah, thank you.
True, because I always feel that now with younger generations, more cultural diversity, as you said, nowadays, it's very common for a corporate individual to have a team sitting in some other part of the world and so forth. So I think this acknowledgement, this education, this awareness of different religions, colors, cultural beliefs, the LGBT, whatever it may be, I think a leader has to keep up with times to be able to, one is understand it and then make a mature decision on which elements of that, because I think every one of these communities bring value to our everyday lives. I actually believe the work culture did something that at least my generation never did, which was question authority, which was just raise a voice against things that were not right and so forth. So I think everybody has a place in the world. But how important, Lewis, according to you, is feedback from a leadership perspective? How open should a leader be to feedback, and what should a leader be doing with constructive feedback?
So I think that feedback is really important for any leader's growth and the overall success of the organization. I think some of the best organizations that I've worked in actually have on the one-on-one sessions whereby the so-called line manager and the one reporting, actually there's a regular catch-up whereby ideally the line manager is open to receiving feedback from the employees to see what he or she can actually improve. So there are a few points which I feel is important, or the value of having accepting to feedback. So one of which is actually enhanced understanding, because if there is a constant, the keyword is constant and not once every year sort of thing, constant regular feedback sessions, I think a leader can actually gain deeper understanding into not just what he or she can improve, but also what the team members what problems and issues the team members are actually facing in their jobs. Because I think by knowing this information, it allows the leader to actually make more informed decisions, and also during that chat session can also address their employees' concerns. And this will allow a form of, I believe it will allow a form of bridging and a form of a stronger connection between the line manager and the person that is reporting to him or her. So that's the first benefit, I think, is enhanced understanding. And the second is actually supporting the leader's performance, because as I've mentioned earlier, by doing this one-on-one chat, the leader will understand the employee's difficulties. And by understanding it, it should not just be a case of that, okay, after the session is the end. But I think that the leader should actually use this opportunity to provide tools and also guidance needed to meet to allow the employee to meet the expectations that is required of him or her. So I think that I think through this conversation, it allows the employees to also perform better. And the third thing I wanted to share is about the conflict resolution point of view. It's often the case whereby if there's no one-on-one, the employee will actually, if there's any disagreement between the employee or line manager, the employer just keep it to him or herself, because the idea or the mindset, whether it's a westernized country or Asian country or any other parts of the region, that I believe there is still a feeling that if my boss is not doing something right, I may not want to tell him or her because I feel there may be backlash and everything. But if there's a system already in place whereby the leader has acknowledged that, okay, whatever you say, I'm going to accept it with no prejudice, I'm just going to take it in, then I think it creates a more conducive environment for the employee to actually share whatever thoughts. And by sharing, I always believe that by having this form of open communication, then there can be the manager and the employee can then work towards a plan to actually improve the relationship. So I think these are the feedback acceptance is basically very important. But more importantly, it's not just the idea of feedback acceptance, because some organizations, they just have this one-on-one thing, but they do not really believe in it, or rather the employees in the company do not believe in it. They just think that they're doing it because they want to look good. So I think I wanted to share with whoever's listening that as a manager or as a boss in that sense, if you have the opportunity to have this feedback session, I think embrace it. I think you should take a step back and talk less and listen to it more, and not just defend your action. Because if your person reporting to you tells you things you disagree with, you should not just say that, oh, I'm doing this because ABC, but you should actually take it in and reflect back on what you have heard. And you should just say thank you to the discussion, because by doing that, I think it will build up and it will actually validate the other person's thoughts and perspective, and the other person will feel that, okay, wow, my boss actually genuinely believe in the value of this feedback, and I'm proud to share with him or her. And therefore, I think this will create a very strong company culture. And I think that by doing that, I also believe that it can increase the employer's retention rate as well, because there's always a saying, correct? People actually leave companies not really because of the company, but because of the manager. So I think with this, it will really increase the employee's retention, which is an aspect of sustainability as well. So yeah, thank you.
So you made a few interesting points there, Lewis. So this having one-on-ones are great, but those one-on-ones sometimes end up just talking about work and projects, and there is hardly any time to have a growth for intimacy between the two people, be the leader or the direct report. I think this about a decade ago, I used to be the head of IT for a particular region, and when I used to talk to my direct reports on a one-on-one, I would either start the session or end the session by making it personal and asking them, hey, how's it going? How's the wife? How's the kids? Are you still supporting that crappy football team that you did? And so forth. It just making it, because what used to happen there, it gives a leader an insight into his or her team members. And out of that, as you said, what comes out of it is just not some actions for one side of the fence, but it's an action for both sides. So I, as a leader, say, oh, you know what? I've understood how Lewis thinks over the years. I've understood how he thinks. I understand what tips him, what inspires him. I can understand what his aspirations are. And as a true leader, I have to work equally on this to either fine-tune myself and also make sure that Lewis, as my team member, has every opportunity and guidance to fulfill his or her own aspirations. So I think one-on-one is very important, and I think feedback is important to both sides, because leaders don't actually think that they know everything. Managers do, but leaders don't think they know everything, because leaders truly want to learn as they grow, and they want to learn from others. Sometimes others who are reporting to them. I think that's what is the true sign of leadership, in my opinion. So my next question I was going to ask you was, and we talked about this roughly, how do you think, in your opinion, has the woke or this cancel culture impacted leadership, good or bad?
How has the woke and cancel culture impacted leadership? I would think that it would be a positive act of leadership, because it forces leaders to be in a certain angle. Because, as I think I shared previously, that basically woke and cancel culture, a leader would become more conscious of their actions. But then the only way to solve this issue of becoming more conscious is to take steps to actively reflect and actively seek feedback from their team members. Now, I think that even having feedback from team members, it does not have to be in an official setting, meaning a Zoom call or in the office. I think it's preferably to go out to a cafe or somewhere to actually have a casual setting, a more intimate setting, so that there is a better environment to know that whatever you share is so-called on an informal basis. So by having such interactions on an ad hoc basis, informal basis, more importantly, with your team members, you'll be able to communicate why certain actions are being done a certain way, or understand from the employee's point of view what issues they're actually facing. And by doing that, I think there's no reason, in my opinion, for the employee to have any disagreement or any grudges against the leader, and therefore cancel culture in that sense would not the employee would not use any form of cancel culture against the leader, because there's a form of trust established. So I think that's what a leader can do. But I think most importantly is also to be genuine in their actions and not do things for a particular motive, because especially with cancel culture, information spreads so fast. So I think that any form of motive, if a person has a hidden motive, it can be identified really quickly. And when that happens, it's going to be much harder to resolve than if everything was communicated well at the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, so which brings me to another point before I come to my next topic is diversity and inclusion. Now, this is also a big thing happening in the world, and rightly so. We're trying to be equal in our day-to-day lives, be it in any form. How do you think, is that equality being abused, do you think, largely, or do you think it's where it is, and are people in higher places just sort of giving into this diversity, sort of, oh, I'll give you a job because you're a minority, not because you are really good for the job? How do you see that working out at the moment?
I think the D&I issue is a very big thing in sustainability under the social pillar, because sustainability is E, S, and G in essence. So how do I see it playing out? I think that, in my opinion, I think that there is value in having diversity of thoughts, or having individuals from different backgrounds, whether they are of different genders, or whether they're LGBTQIA+ individuals or different nationalities, because I think that everyone actually brings their own perspective. And I think in some places, especially since I work a lot in Australia, there is some companies, they hire a chief individual in charge of the indigenous rights, indigenous people, because I think it's more authentic. If you were to go, let's say mining, you need to engage with the indigenous people. It's more authentic if you actually hire an indigenous person who understand the place well and understand the place better, to communicate such thoughts and to be the bridge between the company and the other groups of stakeholders. So I feel that there is actually benefit in having diversity and inclusion policies in place to make everyone feel more welcome, and no one should be discriminated. I do think in some places, yes, maybe because of they want to hit certain quotas to say that, my board is actually 50% is female, then that's amazing and I'm doing great things. I think that is true, but there's no way we can so-called stop that. That is just the case. But I think the advice to companies who are doing that is that, I think instead of using it as a tick of the box to hit your sustainability targets and all sorts of things, use that to your advantage, in the sense that really appreciate the other side of thoughts. Meaning that when it comes to a board meeting, it should not be the case whereby the males, for example, just dominate the discussion, and the females, even though it's 50%, they're just quiet because they don't really feel that much empowerment. So you should be able to have a platform whereby the whole spectrum, since there's already a diverse boardroom in that sense, have an equal chance to talk. So do not do it for the sake of doing it, but actually use the power of it to improve companies' decision or corporate decision, and therefore indirectly improve the corporate culture down the line for the whole organization. Yeah. Okay,
Lewis, in your opinion, 3 characteristics of a true leader.
I think of a true leader, I think I shared previously, I think it's the importance of seeking feedback and embracing feedback, because that is when you are able to identify areas for improvement and where you can actually grow. And you can also help the employees along the way. So that's the first characteristic of a true leader. I think second, is embrace challenges. As a leader, we should not be sticking to the status quo. We should embrace challenges, push for new innovation, push for things to be done, push to help your team members grow in the organization. Just keep on pushing, because I think, especially in the companies scene, you need to be able to push the boundaries so that there can be growth, and employees can also see that, okay, wow, I'm working under a boss who actually believes in me and is pushing me for different opportunities. So the second, I think, is to embrace different forms of challenges, and thirdly is to be persistent, to not give up easily. As a leader, there's a lot of challenges. I think that, especially for those who are transitioning from being to not managing anyone to managing someone, there's going to be a lot of challenges. There's going to be a lot of things that you're going to have to learn. You may be good technically, but when it comes to leading a group of individuals, you realize that, oh wow, I'm totally not cut out for it. But I think that you should just learn. Maybe you can learn from different websites, or learning from yourself, Dominic, and basically that can also be important. So the third one is to be persistent in the efforts of being a leader. So those are my three traits to be a good leader.
So, Luis, I'm going to put you into a scenario. Okay, you're a leader of a group, right? You've got, say, about 5 or 6 people working under you, and then on the other side, you've got these targets that you've got to meet for the business, right?
Yep.
So there's the results bit, and then there's the nurturing and the love and the seeing the growth of your teams. As a leader, both of those responsibilities are on your shoulders, right?
Yep.
How do you think one can balance that well, and what should they keep in mind when they obviously have to meet their results, but they've also got to be respectful and nurturing and helping grow their teams?
Yep. Okay. So I think the idea of whether we should, I think as you alluded to, when you compare against helping the team and also hitting certain targets, I think that it should be both. We, as a leader, we should not just aim for targets and neglect the people who are so-called working for you, and we should not also just focus on the people who are working for you and ignore the targets, because then from a company's point of view, it doesn't make sense at all. So I think there must be a way as a leader to actually integrate both dimensions into one's leadership style. So I think then for me, I'll break down the situation whereby, since you mentioned that there's 5 or 6 people working under me, I think it's to first understand what personalities do they have, because maybe different in even a particular group of 5 to 6 people, one of them maybe they would love to dive straight into details in the discussion. They just want to get things done in a meeting and not want to chit chat with you. And maybe another group would want to, at the beginning, 5 to 10 minutes, talk about life, talk about how things going, sort of thing. So I think we should first be able to identify that first, and therefore in the meetings tailor it accordingly. So I think that's the first thing, because we need to cater to our employees' needs, and I think that's often not seen, because in many leadership or many managers' cases, they often want to just set the agenda and they want to do things the way they want things to be done. So they're not really aware of how their employees actually feel. So that's the first thing I would do. And the second thing I would do is then, once we know how the employees or how the 5 to 6 people actually work, is therefore find a common vision, a common mission, because I think it's important to unite individuals based on a common mission or vision, not just numbers. I think we should not be chasing numbers, but we should chase a vision, and that is important. And by having a common vision and mission, I think that will be a thread that links up the 5 to 6 employees and myself, and therefore work towards the numbers together. Yeah, so those are the things that I will actually do to try and hit the numbers. And even in the fact that we do not hit the numbers, which I try not that to be the case, I think we should just embrace it and just learn from the lessons that we have made. Maybe certain things were not done well initially, but I think that I really believe that if a team is united and there's good trust between the team members, the targets will be met. Otherwise, the target is then not realistic. So I think it's possible. Yeah.
Okay, now moving away from the corporate world, so to speak, let's talk about the world itself. Yeah. Yep. Traditionally, at least in my generation, it was a norm for certain Western countries to be perceived as being the powerful countries. They dictated the vision, they dictated the corporate world and everything else. But I find that over the past decade or so, especially, there's a voice in Asia.
Yes.
Yeah. Africa is finding her voice. I mean, Latin America is finding a voice, like Brazil. There is a voice that is coming out from sort of a part of the world that wasn't necessarily heard before. Yeah. So there's a definite shift in this space.
Yep.
Purely from a leadership perspective on the global platform. Yeah. What does the world leaders need to know from both sides of the fence, from either the historical leading world dominating countries to now the emerging markets and countries who are finding a powerful voice of their own?
Okay, so what do leaders in both sides need to know? I think I totally agree that in the past that the Western countries, or in fact, I think most of the Fortune 500 CEOs, they are from they're Western countries, Western companies mainly, and most of the CEOs and board members are Westerners. So that's the case, but I can see that Asia, or as you mentioned, like Africa or Latin America, actually rising up because there's more opportunities being seen, and also there's more growth opportunities, especially in the sustainability space. So I think that what should leaders need to know is that embrace diversity. I think that one's nationality should not I think the mindset when, and especially an Asian leader goes into a company, that, oh wow, some Asians, in my opinion, maybe they'll feel that, oh, I might have to listen to the Westerners or something because they are perceived to be better in that sense. I think the mindset of challenging boundaries, to challenge the status quo and not be fixated on one's nationality. Because to be frank, you can't choose your nationality, you're born with it. So, but I think that should not define who you are. That may shape your perspective and your perception of the world, and that is a good thing because you have different people have different perceptions and they can add value to an organization. But that does not make you an inferior leader compared to a person from another nationality. So to answer your question about what should leaders on both sides need to know, I think is to embrace that the world is changing and to embrace that nationality does not shape you. You need to accept the other side, in the sense if there is an artificial divide, you need to accept how the other side actually thinks, because that is important. I think a lot of companies, the products especially, they are going to be sold around the world, and therefore consumers are different. Consumers come from different geographical boundaries. So no leader can just think that, oh, I'm, for example, a Western individual, so therefore my consumers are also just Westerners. No, but they can be around the world. And therefore, by understanding the other culture, the other side, let's say an Asian leader, that will be important also from a commercial perspective, because that shapes how the product is being made. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, for my second last question to you, Louis, I'm going to bring it more closer to you.
Yep.
Sustainability, working within energy and so forth, right? The world is becoming less, or is at least hoping to be less dependent on oil, for example, and now looking for cleaner energy sources, right? Talking about leadership in this, right from the governments to the corporates, and even then to us normal people like the consumers, right? What is the mindset that we need to have in terms of, with regard to energy and the evolving of it in the world today?
I think the overarching mindset that governments, corporates, or consumers should have is to just get things going, because I think we all know there's different countries have different national determined contribution or different net zero goals. But then the mindset that I have the sensing is that maybe individuals are afraid to totally shift away from oil, because they feel that there's no feasible technologies at the moment that are less carbon intensive, or there's no feasible alternative energy source. So that may cause some individuals to actually feel that, okay, let's just stick to oil completely, and just because there's no feasible alternative. But I think that should not be the case. I think there should be a transition away slowly from oil. There should not be an immediate stop of oil. It doesn't make sense also, because oil is still a very viable form in terms of the economic perspective that's very much needed in different parts of the world. So I think that governments, corporations, and consumers just need to start doing something and get the ball rolling, and not just wait for a big technology to come out like hydrogen or something along the way. So that's the overarching theme of what I think these three groups should actually start the ball going. Okay,
so from a layman's perspective, we all know that there are certain forms of energy that we're used to which are damaging to the climate, for example, right? So is the answer already solar panels, windmills, electronic cars, for example? Is that really the answer, or are we just jumping to it because it's an alternative available to us today?
I feel that there's no one immediate alternative. That means solar is not good. It should not be the case where it's 100% of the world uses solar, 100% uses wind or electric vehicles along the case, because each technology does have different sets of drawbacks. For example, electric vehicles, the minerals needed like lithium or cobalt, they all require a lot of mining, and therefore we know that if we mine intensely with hugely carbon emitting vehicles, that's going to be bad for the environment as well. Or like even wind, solar, all those requires a lot of minerals. So and in some places it's still a bit expensive, although I must say that for example, solar prices have gone down a lot. So there should be a mix. There should be a mix in the sense that we should look at hydrogen, we should look at even, it's a bit contentious, but even nuclear, or like solar, wind, as you mentioned earlier, or geothermal. They have a mix, and so that even if one technology does not work out, it is fine because there are others to back it up. And I must also say that geographically speaking, Obviously, some countries prefer one technology over the other because of the geographical constraints. So that has to also be taken into consideration.
And that's okay, isn't it?
That's okay, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You should not force like solar on everywhere because it doesn't make sense to, let's say, land or all sorts of things. So I think as of now, there is no one clear winner. There are a few coming up, but they are mainly quite expensive. So I think more investments has to be put into that area, or some people say that there should be less subsidies given to coal and more to the cleaner forms of energy and all sorts to levelize the playing field. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like us running from left to right and right to left, depending on, and we shouldn't get swayed by what we hear in the media. It's about just being able to read about it. We've got the internet, we've got things to read about it. Lewis, great talking to you. What's your last tip, comment, advice you'd want to give young people among our listeners about leadership and about looking at the world?
I think I would like to share that I mean, from a sustainability perspective, we are all, whether we are young or we are old, I think we have all faced the changing climate, whether we're in Singapore or there's going to be more erratic weathers along the way. So I think that as individuals, I know that maybe as individuals, you may think that we are unable to do much because maybe we believe that recycling or sorts of things won't be able to impact the planet much positively. But I think that as individuals, we should still do something, but we don't have to do everything. So find things that we are comfortable in doing to make the planet more sustainable. And I think that all these things does add up along the way. And also to have more healthy habits from a sustainability perspective. And of course, I think just be happy because that is important in life. So thank you.
And to add to that, I would say to the youngsters, don't be swayed by what you read in the media or hear in the media. Make your own decisions. The world is a beautiful place to live in.
Yes.
And you talked about Singapore. I've been in Singapore for 10 years, and the only complaint I sometimes have about Singapore is the weather. But besides that, there's nothing wrong with it. Hey, Lewis, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with me, and much appreciated. And I look forward to having a cup of coffee with you soon.
Thank you so much, Dominic.